and to members of the public who are in the chamber this evening, but to those who may be watching the live webcast, or to those who may be watching a recording of the meeting at a later date. I'll next move to a territorial acknowledgement and want to respectfully acknowledge that not only our meeting, but the entire town of Sidney is in the territory of the West Salish nations, the Sayot Nation, the Sartlip Nation, the Pakwachin Nation, the Sycam Nation, and the Malahat Nation. We're grateful to be living on these lands and grateful for their stewardship of these lands for millennia, and appreciate the ongoing connection that we Salish nations have to these lands and the work that we need to do together to steward these lands today and into the future. Next, turning to approval of the agenda. Since the agenda was published last Thursday, we have 5 changes. There are some additions and some changes. The additions are we've had 4 additional pieces of correspondence since Thursday, and I want to acknowledge the folks who wrote in and on what agenda items. So Jay Wellburn has written a letter regarding the variance permit application on Collinwood Road. That will go under 12A recommendation 1. I've had 2 letters of correspondence from J. Smith and D. Spencer regarding Allbay Road. That is in addition to the 5 items of correspondence that are part of the agenda package. And then third, we have another letter from Jay Wellburn regarding the Sidney Street Market that will go under 13C. So by approving the agenda, which we'll do in a moment, those items will formally become part of the agenda and will be published with the minutes. Councillor O'Keefe has requested raising 2 items from the correspondence for information, and they are the letters from D. Calverley under 15.2. That will now become 14A under correspondence for council's consideration, and a letter from C. Ozawa that is item 15.3 will be moved to item 14B under correspondence. So with those changes, additions and changes, I would look for a mover and seconder that our agenda be approved as amended. Moved by Councillor Novick.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Garnett. All in favor? None are opposed. That motion carries. We're next moving to public participation, where we have an opportunity for members of the public to come forward to speak to any item on the agenda. We ask that you keep your remarks to 4 minutes, that you provide your name and the municipality that you reside in or the organization that you represent. And I will call for a first time. Is there anyone wishing to address council this evening? Please come forward, one at a time. And there is a red button just to activate the mic at the bottom there. Good evening.
Hello. Thank you, Mayor, staff, members of the public. My name's Eric Diller. I live on Resthaven, and I'm addressing item 13A, which is a long simmering situation on Allbay Road. As alluded to, this situation has a long history. Josephine vandesoop talked about it in July of last year and did a lot of work on it. And I agree with her that this has issues for people who are walking or trying to cycle or use wheelchairs on this street. But it's also an issue for the employees of Phillbroks. And so, but let's just go over a few simple facts. We know that Phillbroks, the land that Phillbroks building and parking sits on, I believe anyway, is owned by Isle Marina. Isle Marina provides them with parking for their own employees as well as Phillbroks employees, but that's based on a minimum number that's employed by Phillbroks at a time, which I understand they're busy now, so they would employ more people. Number 2, the town of Sidney requires residents to maintain the right-of-way that they allow parking to exist on, but those residents, in maintaining the right-of-way, the edges of the street, are actually providing a subsidy to drivers. And this is basically a tragedy of the commons. The lack of parking availability is a tragedy of the commons. The analogy would be like we have a piece of water with fish in it, and everyone is allowed to take as much fish as they want, and pretty soon there's no fish allowed for no fish available for anyone. So the town really is falling down on its job of simply managing the street. And so the town has made a couple of proposals that they widen the shoulders, and that if the budget for widening the shoulders is approved, that they put no parking signs up to accommodate pedestrian traffic. Yeah, I don't know. They're both just kind of not very good solutions. But in my opinion, the town should honor the residents' requests and put no parking signs up on much of the street. I don't say all of the street, but much of the street. But what it should also do is recognize that on-street parking is a scarce commodity and that they should work to manage it appropriately. They should designate a few areas close to Harbor Road as parking and modify the street appropriately to designate those spaces. And they should also price parking in a 250-meter radius of the ends of Harbor Road, as well as the parking that is on Harbor Road, and either price it with meters or by a permit system, selling only the number of permits that the number of parking spaces exist. A lot of municipalities make a mistake of selling more permits than spaces that exist, thereby continuing the problem of parking congestion. And then the last thing that I would suggest is that if there is any net income from all of this price parking, that they should reinvest the money in making the streets around Harbor Road and on Harbor Road better for residents and businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we go to the next speaker in the room, we do have a speaker waiting online. I'll invite Maria O'Brien to connect. Good evening, Ms. O'Brien. You have the floor for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My motivation for asking to speak to you this evening was listening to you motivate regarding a developer's request for 5 variances at both 9895 and 9899 7th Street at your last meeting. I want to start by thanking the Mayor and particularly Councillor Garnett, who spoke in defense of the OCP. It embodies the combined wishes of the citizens of Sidney, and it is very heartening to hear it being referenced in your motivation when variances from it are being requested. Okay, then since I walk up 7th Street to shop several times a week, I decided to take a look at the situation. What I learned was that, in my opinion, the developer's representative had significantly misrepresented to you the current character of 7th Street opposite the schoolyard. If those 2 buildings were to be allowed with their proposed flat faces rising 4 stories from the ground closer to the sidewalk than most buildings on 7th Street, it will significantly change 7th Street's streetscape. It will set a precedent if it is repeated, or so that people are more likely to ask for it to be repeated. It will be an image of Sidney for the children playing there, rather like a New York City streetscape. Now, the majority of properties are well set back. Many have multiple trees and spacious front gardens. I do have a couple of images if I have time to show you, and the skill. In addition, the proposed plan shows no regard for the privacy of the next door rear neighbors, another violation of the OCP. The developer's representative representative focused your attention on the two existing larger, newer buildings, one of which has the setback that he is requesting, but it is only 2 stories high, and the other has varying setbacks rather than being one mass flat surface closer to the sidewalk than the OCP permits. Although my primary reason for asking to speak to you was to say that I am grateful to hear you defending the OCP. A secondary reason is that I am a member of the Sidney Community Association. Twice in 2024, we have polled our memberships, and twice they have confirmed that trees, streetscape, and the character of Sidney as a town are the things that they value most highly about living here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for speaking to council this evening, Ms. O'Brien. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
I'll next call for the next speaker in the room. Please come forward. Good evening. There's just the button there to activate the mic, and then if you could introduce yourself, please.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Iwaziak. My wife and I, we live at 10418 Eden Place, which has a boulevard adjacent to Allbay. I'm here to discuss our concern about employee and contractor parking along Allbay. Although there are many issues to consider, the major priority for us is for the safety of residents and pedestrians who are forced to walk on the roadway because the boulevards are blocked by the large number of non-resident vehicles. We've had at least 2 pets struck by vehicles in Allbay this summer, and it's only a matter of time before a pedestrian is injured. The staff's report, the report's recommendation to widen the gravel shoulders on Allbay will only encourage and allow for more, not less, non-resident parking during the day. As a result, the danger to pedestrians will be even greater than it is now. I'm asking tonight for you to table the staff recommendation to widen the gravel shoulders on Allbay. Not only would this be an expensive proposition for a plan that is not going to be effective at solving the problem, there is also a better long-term solution to consider. Within the last 2 weeks, I've had discussions with both Greg Dickinson, president of Isle Marina, and Jamie Hansen, president of Phillbroks, regarding this issue. I found the discussions to be cordial, insightful, and very productive. The 3 of us were in agreement that the best long-term solution for all parties would be to find an alternative location for their employees to park, thereby returning Allbay to the safe country lane atmosphere we used to enjoy. I find it difficult to understand why your staff in their report made no effort to consider the option of alternatives to parking on Allbay, when it is clear that both the marine businesses and the residents see this as a way to deal with the issue and make Allbay a safe place to walk. There's a reference in the report that Resthaven was suggested by some residents as an alternative for parking. The response from staff was that they have not reviewed this area of Resthaven to confirm if it could accommodate the volume of vehicles that currently park on Allbay. I have an engineering background, and I've designed and built roadways for residential subdivisions in urban areas. So let me help you with that idea. The section of Resthaven from Ardwell to Harbor Road is approximately 470 meters long. Allowing for the 33 driveways and 1 road intersection along that stretch, you would have the capacity to park approximately 80 to 90 vehicles. In my meeting with Mr. Dickinson, we explored a number of other options for alternative parking, including the idea of allowing parking on the south side of Harbor Road along the yacht park, rather than the north side of Harbor Road, which has all the access lanes to the marina parking lot. This would provide an additional 140 meters of parking space, enough to accommodate approximately 20 more vehicles. So far, that's 100 additional parking spaces to consider. Mr. Dickinson also suggested that due to the seasonality of the marina's business, there may be some opportunities to better utilize the Van Isle parking lot in the off-season for employees and contractors. I also know from Mr. Hansen that Phillbroks is currently considering options that could provide suitable parking for their employees. I'm asking the council table the report being presented by staff today until such time as they are able to assess the viability of providing alternative locations for marina employees and contractors to park. In addition, I would like to recommend to council that staff be directed to meet with representatives from both the marine businesses and the Allbay neighborhood to review the options that are under consideration prior to finalizing and updating their report to council. Thank you for your time, your consideration.
Thank you for coming forward and being under the wire at 4 minutes. Thank you. I'll call for a second time for speakers. Please come forward. Good evening.
I have a graph I was hoping to hand out. I've got copies for all of you if that's okay.
Feel free to do that. We won't start your
Okay.
your remarks until you start speaking.
So my name is Jamie Wellborn. I live in Sydney, and this is in regards to the Allbay parking concerns. My main concern is that I am a regular person who walks along Allbay for recreation, and then also for work I deliver by e-bike to customers. There's at least 3 regular customers along that way that I have. I find during the week it gets pretty busy, and it is a little iffy there when if I bike through. There's a long door lane, especially between Eden to Bowden. And then my main concern is just, it feels like this whole issue is an issue of the safety of residents versus the convenience of the people who want to park where they want to park, which I understand that that's important to them, but I feel like the priority should be on the safety of residents. One thing is that I noted, you can see in the graph I did this count, just to get an idea of how many residential versus employee spots were being used, and on different sections of the neighborhood. And one thing I noticed that's not mentioned there is that the Van Isle Marina lot this morning at around 7:30 had 60 empty spots at least. I stopped counting around 60. And then around 3 p.m. today it had 80 empty spaces in the Van Isle Marina parking lot. So I'm not sure if maybe this is a quiet time of year for them, but in my opinion, if there's some way that them and Phillbroks can come to an agreement to allow more employees to park there, that feels like that would redirect people off of Allbay. I think another solution could be if Phillbroks were to look for alternatives to driving. They had mentioned in their letter to council that they have lots of employees who live actually within Sydney, and I feel like if you live within Sydney, such a small municipality, is driving really the most efficient way to get to work when there could be carpooling or taking the bus, riding their bike, or walking. So thank you for your time, and I think that's all I have for you tonight.
Thank you for coming forward and for your correspondence as well. Please come forward.
Should be read. Is it on now?
We're good.
I'm Colleen Ozawa. I live at 10488 Resthaven Drive. I believe there's correspondence on the agenda. It's regarding the tree that died in the rear of my property. So there was a huge trench dug behind my property. The actual property where it was dug is on Patricia Place. That's the easement. About half of the root system of my tree was dug up. It was on the easement. It was left open for several weeks, and so my neighbor, I live in a duplex, my neighbor and I were both concerned. We both had mature trees along that trench. And we were told the trees were healthy, but within a year and a half, my tree died. So I have received correspondence saying that it can't be proven that that was the cause of the death of my tree. It's hard to pinpoint sometimes why a tree dies, but to me it's pretty clear there's a correlation there. It was a healthy tree. After all that root exposure, it died. So I'm hoping that will be considered, that it is the town's responsibility to take that tree down, because I'm a pensioner. It's going to be an expensive proposition to have someone, that tree is dead, it has to come out. So the other thing I'd just like to talk about, a couple of other points, is that my yard is really under pressure from the development around me. There were 5 single-family homes, 6 actually. There's now 31 townhouses and a duplex, and the duplex was given a significant variance to come closer to my fence at the rear. So I tried to talk to the developer about not putting in a cedar hedge, and he tried to make a case about why cedar hedges are so great. They're a green screen, but they also have shallow roots that are really invasive, and I've lost my vegetable garden now because of that thuya hedge. And then the other issue is parking, because Resthaven is so congested now, I almost have no sight line to get out of my driveway. So the only thing, I now back into my driveway, and there's times where I have to wait 5 minutes for it's even safe for me to back into my driveway. I'm wondering if it could be considered to drop the speed limit along there to 30, because people, maybe not all from North Saanich, but they smoke along there. It's sort of an arterial road into Sidney. And I am within the school zone, but people even don't always respect that. But I think it might help if it would be considered to have it drop to 30 at all times. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward this evening. I'll call for a third time if anyone's wishing to come forward. Seeing no further speakers, I'll thank all speakers this evening and close public participation. We're next moving to presentations, and under 4D1 we have a presentation from Peter Van Dyke, the past president of the Rotary Club of Sidney by the Sea, to make a presentation to council. Ms. Van Dyke, I think you're aware that our presentation time is 10 minutes. Not a requirement to take up that entire time, but we'd be pleased if you'd also consider taking questions from members of council after.
So my name is Peter Van Dyke, 7701 Central Saanich Road. I'm here to make a proposal on behalf of the 2 Rotary Clubs in Sidney, and hope that you will consider our offer. Rotary International has a number of areas of focus. One of these is the area of promoting peace. After the World War II bombings in Japan, a number of peace initiatives sprang up in Japan where there was a strong feeling in the populace that there should be no more war. One of these is the Peace Pole Project. The notion behind this project is to erect poles with messages of "May peace prevail on earth" in the major languages of the world. There are now over 250,000 peace poles installed in all countries of the world. The project is affiliated with Rotary, and our 2 clubs would like to present the town of Sidney with a peace pole to erect along the waterfront. Our world today is ravaged by wars. In the Middle East and the one between Russia and Ukraine, people have had to flee their homes due to war and climate catastrophes. In our communities, First Nations people were displaced from their lands through chicanery and deceit and had their children taken from them. Our Japanese Canadian neighbors had homes and belongings taken, and they were forced to live in inadequate housing in camps in the interior. People today are suffering and dying due to addictions, suffering from racism and poverty. While we are surrounded by pain and discomfort, we have an opportunity to show that we stand for peace by erecting a peace pole in the town of Sidney. These poles are approximately 8 feet tall, white vinyl, 4 inches on each side. There are peace messages in 8 of the world's major languages. We can choose the languages we would like on our pole. In the proposal before you, I suggested English, French, Spanish, Mandarin, Japanese, Hebrew, Arabic, and Senchothan. On further reflection, I would like to change Spanish to Russian, which is the written language used in Ukraine and will be familiar to our new Ukrainian neighbors. Imagine being a person from a war-torn country who comes for a visit and finds peace messages in their language. If council is willing, the Rotary Clubs of Sidney would like to donate a peace pole, demonstrating to residents and visitors alike that we stand for peace and that it is a core value in our community. By joining in on this project, we hope the town of Sidney will cover the costs and responsibilities of installing the pole and ongoing maintenance. And we will purchase the pole and have it delivered to the park's maintenance yard. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this important topic. Are there any questions?
Thank you for the presentation. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Councillor Duncan.
Sorry. Thank you for bringing this forward. I guess my question would be for you to is whether the languages that you would be considering are based on, I guess, at the time you install it, global political situations and a commentary on that, which I wouldn't want a peace pole to become a lightning rod for that sort of thing, is my concern. And so I'm wondering if you would consider looking at languages that are spoken primarily by people who are immigrating here. You mentioned Ukrainian. We took in a lot of Ukrainian refugees, so that makes sense. But we do have a lot of Spanish immigrants here. I would also wonder if you would consider Chinook, because that's the trading language which existed here since before people even arrived, and the first immigrants to this area would have immediately begun speaking Chinook as well. We know that the Breathauers spoke it with the Wasanich people, so.
Well, we were able, I was in touch with the Sanic people about getting a phrase. It took a few months for them to come back to me, but we have Senchothan.
Yeah,
So-
Chinook would be Mamuk Klush Tum Tum.
Okay, well, it's up to the pleasure of council. We could have two First Nations languages if that's your wish.
I'm just suggesting it. I just think that
Mhm.
a priority to the local languages and the idea of the peace with the local tribes, the local people. You know, Chinook would have been spoken by both all of the original European settlers and the Salish from Alaska all the way down to California. So it would be an interesting thing to add. But I would say that I would consider the message of peace being one of actual peace rather than commentary on global politics that might be contentious is more what I'm hoping.
Well, the phrases are about peace. They're not about war. They're not supporting any particular countries. It's just phrases supporting peace in the different major world languages.
Right. Obviously, since there's only 8, though, it would be that the choice of languages regarding local populations and the message there seems like it would be targeted. So I'm just saying how that's considered, I think, would be something to talk about while we consider it. Thanks.
It's at your
Thanks.
pleasure.
Thank you for taking the question. Other questions? Councillor Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. Are these poles simply placed in a hole in the ground, or
Yeah, they're
is it required to have some kind of a concrete base to?
Well, I'll leave
ensure
it up
its
to the engineering
longevity?
staff, but I just as you would erect a flagpole, it'd be the same mechanics as putting up a flagpole. So that's
Does just placing the pole raw in the ground, does that not shorten its lifespan?
good point. I will be in touch with the people that provide it and with your engineering staff to talk about the best way to install it.
Thank you. That's all, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just one small question, and it mentions in the letter that a request to have the addition of a rotary wheel symbol, and I'm wondering if that's on the pole itself.
It'll
And then
be-
the
yeah.
The second part is a request that a white vinyl plaque indicating the donation from the 2 Rotary clubs. So could you just, is Rotary appearing on, the symbol appearing on the pole, or is it just going to be in the dedication
No,
plaque?
it'll just be on the pole. In the rotary wheel will be on the pole.
And sorry, the dedication plaque will be on the ground at the foot of the pole, or?
Yes,
Okay, and making reference to the
but it's
Rotary
a
clubs.
gift from the clubs. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Mayor, and if I may, through you to staff, if it's possible. I'd love to hear staff weigh in on this and their perspective.
Sorry, actually,
Would you want that after?
yeah,
Okay.
it's questions from the presenter at this
Okay.
point. When we close that off, we can have our discussion and questions. No, thanks, Councillor.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for coming forward. And so, Council, we've had the presentation. It is a request that we should consider this evening. Councillor Keefe, I'm sorry I didn't acknowledge your hand. Please go ahead.
Oh, no, I was kind of segueing into the next phase, I presume, which you're going to mention in regards to decision, or are we at a point to ask questions of staff?
You just, yes, we're just now going to ask questions of staff. So if you'd like to lead it off, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. In terms of making a decision at this point, what I would be more comfortable with is referring this to staff to allow them some time to consider the request. Questions I might have for them, which we're just throwing at them now, so they perhaps haven't had a chance to consider. So I'd be interested in staff's perspective in terms of, do we have a policy or precedent on these sorts of things? Is the what would be the cost to install and maintain the pole? And while promoting peace is a good objective, is erecting a vinyl pole the best way to do that? Whether we might want to consider something sort of in line with the sentiment of this, but more perhaps something from the Wasanich Nation in regards to a totem pole and that sort of thing. So I'm putting those questions out there now. I don't know if staff is prepared to answer those, but my inclination would be to be referring this to staff to come back with a report at a later date with their recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to CAO Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Councillor O'Keefe for that question and that insight. And I would agree with Councillor's recommendation for staff to be given an opportunity to consider it further and bringing it back. I do believe it's a good practice for council to not make decisions on delegation presentations that are just before them, but rather to give staff and council time to consider the matter further.
Thank you. Further discussion? We don't have a motion on the floor. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion that this item be referred to staff for further consideration and to report back to council.
Councillor O'Keefe moves that recommendation. Councillor Novick seconds it. Further motivation, Councillor O'Keefe?
No, I think I covered that previously.
Thank you. Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really like the idea of the donation by Rotary. Rotary is an organization that does great works around the world, and I'm pleased that they see fit to make this offer to us. But I think before we make a final decision, we need to look at where it would go, how it would be installed, decisions around things like the languages and sign it and whatever other communication is on the pole. And before we have a motion on that, I think staff should come back to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Denton.
Yeah, thank you. I guess when staff comes back with the report, I know the Rotary has donated in the past quite a lot to the playgrounds that are in town. And so I think maybe some of the things we might consider is alternate locations that are maybe near the waterfront or but that are near the playgrounds. And specifically, it makes kind of the message or the how it's being presented as whether it's a town project or it's a gift from Rotary to the town, much clearer, because I think some of the way, Councillor O'Keefe was saying, a pole by the Sinchothan and a totem pole, we already have one that was part of the town, and I think making it clear that this is a Rotary project that the town has provided space for rather than something that the town did is probably an important point. As we've said, like the choices of the language are, if they're at the request of Rotary, somewhat arbitrary. And there are hundreds and hundreds of languages, and so picking which ones is sending a very specific message. And for my thought would be about that giving precedence to languages that are spoken by people who are actually living in Sidney. Versus singling out particular countries that people might be visiting from that might currently be at war. But, the Sudan is the largest war. Why isn't Sudanese on there? We have a large number of new temporary foreign workers who are from India. Punjabi, Hindi would also be potential languages. And so I feel the vagaries of immigration trends and visitors kind of impact that. So really looking at kind of what the appropriate group or the appropriate message for the local context and for Rotary versus the town is going to be something to look at. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I certainly came in this evening supportive of the concept. We have similar installations within our art walk, and the town has policies around donations of this type. And so I certainly appreciate the CEO's suggestion that we support the motion before us, having staff just dive a little further into this, and I think take the context of our existing policies and take a look at this project through that lens. That's probably good due diligence for sure. So please don't be discouraged by this going to staff. I think it's probably an important part of the process. I don't envy you the task of looking towards 8 languages for the poll. Perhaps given comments this evening, it gives you pause to think that and present to staff with respect to your intent there, so that it's clear when it comes forward. But I hope that we as a council, our intents are really just to ensure that as it'll have a prominent location in our community, that it puts our best foot forward to a broader audience. And I thank Rotary for the opportunity to have this discussion. I'll leave my thoughts there. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just speak briefly that I'm supportive of this going to staff. Also supportive of and thank Rotary for the offer of the donation. My expectation with this motion on the floor is that staff are considering how this could be implemented in coming back with recommendations. I appreciate there has been some consideration by colleagues that we might consider, or the report might cover something as an alternative to the peace poll donation, and I'm not supportive of that. We've had a specific request for this peace poll donation, and I would like to see the report address those, the implementation of that. I'll leave my comments there and go to Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one last thought. I think Councillor Duncan had an interesting point, and I'm just wondering if, while this is going to staff, they might consider some symbolic message of peace that transcends languages, because as Councillor Duncan said, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of languages spoken in the world, and trying to choose 8 that are representative or symbolic in any way is a difficult task at best. And I'm sure that there are a lot of ways of getting a peace message across symbolically that would carry the same weight, yet it wouldn't single out any particular language group. And by singling out particular language groups, of necessity, you must eliminate certain language groups, which is a problem. Because there's always going to be someone who will say, well, why didn't you choose our language? So I'm going to leave it there, but I think it's something for staff to consider, that if there's a way to have this peace poll with symbolic messages rather than trying to find 8 languages that fit a very limited matrix. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Novak. I'm going to ask staff to read, Ms. Nelson, if you could read back the recommendation.
Yes, that this be referred back to staff to consider the request and report back to council.
Okay. I might be a bit repetitive, but I think council, we've had a couple of expressions by colleagues with regards to considering alternatives to this peace poll. As is indicated in the presentation and the information, there's 250,000 of these peace polls under the design that has been presented. To request staff to come up with possible alternatives in terms of design or representing peace, or another way of dealing with languages. If 250,000 of these poles can be installed around the world with 4 or 8 languages, I think we can arrive at that, and I think we should have some consensus. I don't know whether we need to amend the resolution to indicate that it's for a report back on the installation of this piece of this donated peace pole, rather than exploring options for other symbols of peace or other messages in other forms. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, and thank you for those comments. I'm happy with the motion as it is. What I'm looking at in regards to my comments for alternative options. I'm happy to withdraw that. I listened to my colleagues and your comments about this is something that is put forward from Rotary, so I think it should be focused on that. In terms of other considerations, that was just put in there for staff to have the option of bringing forward things that we might not have thought about in terms of placement or maintenance and that sort of thing. So I think the motion as it is gives them that direction and latitude to come back to us.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call Councillor Novick for a third time.
I'm
Normally
sorry,
twice on an
I
item.
apologize, Mr. Mayor, but I have a thought that maybe will gain some traction. And that is that I'm prepared to make an amendment if I feel that there's some ability for this to hold, that we limit the languages to simply the official languages of Canada, English, French, and then Senchothan, which is a local language of the Indigenous people here.
Councillor
and leave it
Novick,
at
am I
that.
taking that as an amendment? Are you moving an amendment to that effect?
I will make that motion to
amend?
To amend, yes.
Okay, I will look for a seconder on that motion. Not having a
Novick.
seconder, the motion does not move forward. Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you again. We're next moving to item 6, and under item 6A, we have Development Variance Permit Application. Just pause a moment here. Under 6A, we have Development Variance Permit Application number DV100362 at 2306 Beacon Avenue to relax the sign bylaw regulations in order to allow 2 roof signs. Council, we have considered this at a previous meeting, gave direction for notice to neighboring business owners. We've had no written submissions, and we do have a recommendation. I'd look to a council member to move the recommendation.
I move the application be approved.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mayor. With respect to the motions before us, I recall when this came to, I believe, Committee of the Whole, I did raise the observation that we'd had similar requests for a variance, which council denied of this nature. And in my mind, it related to either illumination or backlighting of the sign. And if I may, through you to staff, just vet with them their comfort level if the motion were be to amend it, if the motion were to be amended to read that the application be approved on the condition that the signs not be illuminated or backlit. And I'd like to just verify that with staff prior to advancing that.
Prior to advancing an amendment, I'll turn to staff for any comment, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor. I don't see any problem with that amendment.
Councillor Rintoul?
Okay, thank you. If I may, then I'd like to move an amendment that the application be approved on the condition that the signs not be illuminated or backlit.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
We haven't moved and seconded. Any further motivation?
Yeah,
Councillor
thank you.
Rintoul?
Just briefly, Mayor. I know I posed this question of the applicant when this came forward, and at the time they noted that there was no intent to illuminate or backlight the sign, so I don't think this hinders them in any way if council are to support this amended motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? We're calling the question on the amendment. That is approved. The amendment is approved. I'll now call the question on the main motion as amended. All in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you. We're next turning to 7A, which is I would look for a mover and seconder that the minutes of our regular council meeting of October 15th be approved.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any corrections? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I don't have any corrections, but I will have a motion arising afterwards.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe, for letting me know. So no further no corrections to the minutes. I'll call the question. All in favor? The minutes are adopted. Councillor O'Keefe, I'll turn the floor to you.
Thank you. This is in a motion arising relating to the motion that we passed in regards to the Shaw Center funding. And the motion with some input from staff is that staff review the current agreement between the town and Shaw Ocean Discovery Center to ensure that the town is advised on the center's annual reporting requirements.
Thank you, Councillor Keefe. That's on the floor. Do we have a seconder? I will second the motion for discussion. Councillor Keefe, if you wish to moderate.
Yeah, sure. So as council may recall, in recent years, you know, there's been some difficulties with some community organizations, and so we've tightened up our accountability in regards to reporting requirements, and I think that's something that the community expects from us. You may recall that in 2020, when the Shaw Center came forward to us for additional funding because they were having difficulties, we did impose some requirements. Those were such things as providing annual financial statements, annual attendance and membership numbers. We wanted to make sure that they had plans in place for capital reserve fund and a minimum operating fund balance. So all I'm proposing here is that those are just some of the things, but I would leave it to staff to review that previous agreement. So what I'm proposing here is that with this ongoing funding, that there continue to be provisions for the Shaw Center to report annually to council on these things. And that's consistent with what we've asked Memorial Park Society, Mary Winspear Center to do, and our trend towards that more accountability. Thank you.
As the seconder of the motion, I'll speak it and maybe seek a bit of clarification from the mover, but part of my understanding was that the agreement with the Mary Winspear Center was amended to include the town being notified of the society, the Memorial Park Society, an arm's length organization, making their annual, doing their annual reporting requirements to the provincial and federal governments. And so is the intent of this motion to do that. I'm not suggesting an amendment to the motion. I'm seeking the intent by the mover. I think I think with regards to reporting to council, there's already those in place, and they're already reporting to council once a year. So.
Yeah, and so all that I was doing, actually we took out, in consultation with staff, took out the section about federal and provincial reporting requirements, just to give staff more latitude in regards to those other requirements that are already in place. So all this is proposing to do is to ensure that the reporting requirements that we had in place, which were temporary, are now carried forward into this long-standing agreement that we will have with the Shaw Center.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Mayor. It's my recollection, and I'll yield to staff, and I see Mr. Hissick isn't here, but if staff were aware that this motion arising was coming forward this evening, perhaps they know the answer to this. I thought council had directed staff, as these agreements are renewed and addressed, to implement funding agreements with each of the partners who receive funding. So that includes the Memorial Park Society, that includes the museum, that includes the Shaw Center. And so I just wanted to clarify if this might well be redundant when I checked through staff. But again, I realize Mr. Hissick is not here this evening, and I'll yield to see staff's comment on that.
I'll turn to Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor. I'm not aware of that previous motion or new policy and or what those agreements might actually look like. I've not reviewed them myself.
Thank you.
Corporate Officer.
Ms. Nelson?
Sorry, your microphone.
Your mic.
Yes. I don't remember exactly what the resolution was, but I know that Mr. Hissack has met with some of our community organizations that we provide funding to and have a funding agreement. But I don't remember the exact wording, but I think he probably has that on the radar for the next renewal.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I believe that has been the practice all along. I don't want to create the impression to residents that the town has been providing funding to these organizations without that sort of reporting stipulation. And so I'm a little unclear as to what we're doing here that's not already in place or been reinforced by this council. So I'll yield there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think given how late this came forward, this suggestion of motion arising, staff have been unable to confirm the current agreement or changes that might be implemented, and so I think this is a motion that has latitude to when staff proceed to look at it. So, Councillor Keefe?
Yeah, thank you. When I consulted with staff this afternoon, the reason we crafted the wording of the way we did was to provide staff broader latitude, so that when Mr. Hissack comes back and he looks at this and says, yeah, we're already doing that, or there's other things that should be included, then it would give staff the latitude to do that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other discussion? So this is a motion arising. I'll call a question on the motion arising. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Garnett and Councillor Rintoul are opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We're next moving to the Mayor's report under item 10A. There's only a single item. We have the CRD board highlights from the October 9th board meetings. Typically, I don't comment further on the highlights. I make reference for residents or those interested, that there are several links within the report that provide the reports and actually the video for people. I think this is just a good mechanism for members of the Sidney public to be aware of CRD matters that do go through the board and impact the entire region, and in some cases may have specific effect on Sidney residents, and none of the items at that particular meeting had specific effect, significant change for the town of Sidney. So we don't require a motion to receive. We don't have any council reports under number 11. I'm turning to committee reports. Sorry, Councillor Garnett. Sorry.
Sorry if I may, Mayor, just to add upon the greenhouse gas emissions targets in relation to the Panorama Rec Center. So I'd bring, just if I could, just because it was just on this particular item, mention the fact that the Panorama Rec Center is known to be one of the highest emitters of greenhouse gas emissions in the CRD. In terms of building emission reductions, the energy recovery project that's been underway, phase 1, which is the new arena dehumidifier, has been installed, and phase 2 is now up for tender. And I think it's important for the community to know that the energy recovery project staff is estimating there will be a 58% site-wide reduction in GHGs. So that's pretty substantial, not just for our community, but for the CRD as a whole. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor, and as a representative from Council to PRC, thank you for noting that important aspect. We're now turning to committee reports under number 12. We have one this evening. It's under 12A, the Committee of the Whole meeting, and we first receive the minutes from that meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, we don't require a motion. We have received those. I will now turn to Councillor Novick, who is chair of our meeting, to take us through the two recommendations, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Your mic, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. The first recommendation is regarding development variance permit application number...
Sorry, Councillor, you can just read the recommendation?
Oh, okay. The recommendation R1, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, 246 feet of 2104 Collinwood Road be notified regarding the development variance permit application number DV100361. Do you need the full relaxing read in?
Continue the recommendation.
Okay. To relax subdivision development bylaw requirements to allow overhead wiring for a new single-family dwelling, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. We did have a good discussion at the meeting, but I'll turn to Councillor if there's any discussion, further discussion. Councillor Novick?
No, I have nothing to add.
Okay, seeing no discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Councillor Novick?
Thank you. Recommendation 2 is that development permit application number DP100845 and development variance permit application number DV100358 for 9895 and 9899 7th Street to relax requirements for minimum front and rear setback, maximum projection of cladding into setback areas, maximum parking area, and location of 3-bedroom units be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for further review and comment.
Second.
We have it moved in and seconded. Any discussion? Further to the discussion we had at Committee of the Whole, I see two. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan, then Councillor O'Keefe. Sorry,
The mover doesn't have a comment?
I have nothing to add.
Yeah, I didn't.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say that for this one, for the public, this is obviously another project that had a lot of variances. We've had a lot of those this year. And this stage of the process where we forward it to the Advisory Planning Commission is simply to get their additional review against the OCP and against their idea of how this fits into the overall town as well, and whether the variances being requested are reasonable, and so this isn't about kind of, again, just stamping through variances. This is something where we're getting additional feedback with their view for the OCP, and we'll see what we hear. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mayor. This is more a point of order, I believe. I'm looking at the development variance number in the agenda. In the first part, it says DP100848 and DV100360, and then that's different from what is in the recommendation. Am I reading that correctly? I'm just wondering which is the correct number.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I'm just turning to staff for clarification. Mr. Edwards?
Yes, Mayor, there is a typo there, and we'll just try to sort out which is the actual correct number.
Okay, so if we could just make reference to the correct numbers. Sorry, Councillor O'Keefe, were you saying that the correct numbers are in the Committee of the Whole minutes and not on the agenda?
I'm not sure which are the correct ones. All I'm saying is that they're different. So in the R2, in the bold, it mentions certain numbers, and then in the actual recommendation, the numbers are different, so.
I think we turn, Ms. Verhagen?
It's 848.
It's so the correct numbers are DP100848 and Development Variance Permit DV100360.
Correct.
Okay, so the record is corrected. Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe.
And so I presume the motion will be corrected.
The motion is corrected by virtue of confirming that, yeah.
Sure. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you again. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Novick. We're now turning to staff reports. We have 4 this evening. The first under 13A is Allbay Road parking concerns. We have a report from the Director of Engineering. We'll turn to Ms. Clary for an introduction, please.
Good evening. As you've heard tonight, there are ongoing parking concerns along Allbay Road. To protect the municipal boulevard fronting their properties, some residents have put out rocks and garbage cans to prevent parking in these areas. Staff received bylaw complaints about these obstructions, so investigated and found them to be in contravention of the town's bylaws. Staff are recommending that these items be removed from the boulevard, and that the town install wider gravel shoulders along Allbay to accommodate on-street parking and a pedestrian corridor. If approved tonight, this would be brought forward during budget deliberations to review with other town priorities. It should be noted that the town cannot force a private property owner to allow their employees to park within their lot. So although that would be a really good idea, we have no mechanism to actually require that to happen. And I'm here to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry that I hadn't thought of it ahead of time to maybe email you, but I'm just wondering if there has ever been a discussion. I know that the Salem Harbor has a lot down there, and I don't know how well it's used, and I don't know, is it privately owned simply by Salem Harbor, or is that another town lot that goes with the park as well?
Through to Councillor Duncan, that is operated by CM Harbor.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rintoul?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff, you make reference in here to having had dialogue with at least one that I recollect of the employers in the area, one of the major employers in the area who anecdotally we've heard maybe without their own parking facilities for staff to use. Can staff elaborate if there been any other dialogue with any of the major employers, so to include Van Isle Marina, others along Harbor Road? And then you also had noted in the report some references to construction projects which may in the current time be complicating matters in this area and parking. So if you could just touch on those, please, for council's benefit.
Sure. Through to Councillor Rintoul. So there is a letter from Phillbroks attached to this report, so that provided some information from them. Staff have discussed this with Van Isle as well. We are in fairly frequent communication with them because we also are building the Harbor Water Main project in that area as well. There's not any, silver bullet solutions, I would say, that we've come across so far. And then with respect to, sorry, what was your second question?
Construction projects that may be fairly significant. I know the former Blue Peter site is one, but if you can elaborate on that, or if there are others that we're aware of that may be temporarily having implications.
Yes, so the construction of the Harbor Water Main project has impacted parking along that corridor, or along Harbor Road, which has moved some employees to park on Allbay instead. That project's currently on hold at this time. We expect to get back to it early in the new year, most likely. And then there's residential construction happening on Allbay as well, which the town doesn't really have control over. There could be other properties that are under construction in the future. So that could be an evolving thing, having residential construction employees parking along Allbay as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, have other parking solutions been researched, such as ones that were suggested from the gallery today?
Through to Councillor Novak, again, we cannot force a private property owner to provide parking for employees. There is a history that's evolved in this area where, and in Sydney's downtown as well, you see it, where there's no parking for employees on certain business properties. So in the downtown, there was a whole parking lot built for downtown employees, but there's not that opportunity in this area to build a full parking lot. There's just not space. There's not town-owned land. unless we want to turn part of Resthaven Park into a parking lot or something like that, but that's not even that close to that area. So really, it would just be moving the employees that are currently parking on Allbay to a different location, such as Resthaven, potentially, Resthaven Drive. And the town staff have not done a parking study at all in that area. We did include the area right in front of Resthaven Park as part of our downtown parking study that we recently did. So we do have information on that, but we don't have information on how many vehicles are regularly parked on Resthaven at this time, further down on Resthaven.
Okay. I'm just wondering if that's something we should look into before we move ahead with this particular recommendation. Rhetorical question.
Okay, so this is, we've had the introduction from staff, we've had questions from staff. Councillor Rintoul?
Sorry, I beg your pardon, Mayor. If I could ask staff for the rationale and the recommendation of recommending that the shoulders on both sides, the gravel shoulders, be widened, as opposed to in the report where it noted consideration of one or both. And I only ask, I think, in the context of, I think I get widening the shoulder on one side to address the parking challenge, and it needs to be addressed, and these are significant employers in the area. But widening on the opposite side, if it's going to be earmarked for no parking to provide for pedestrian safety, is the issue then just to ensure that those pedestrians aren't on the roadway and that they're walking on a more deliberate shoulder area? If I can ask staff to clarify that, please.
Through to Councillor Rintoul, that is the intent. The report also notes that back in 2014 there was a decision made to keep Allbay past Bowden, like north of Bowden, more narrow than the rest of Allbay as well. So it is quite a narrow road already. So that would just provide that additional pedestrian area off of the road. Even though you know, it's a 30-kilometer-an-hour road, we do get complaints of speeding down there and different things, which it's very hard to, like the police don't necessarily have time to go out and enforce that on a regular basis. So really just providing that walking space off the road was something that we thought might help.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Noble?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you to staff, I've read the report, I've looked at the maps. I don't really understand how adding gravel shoulders on both sides and putting a no parking sign on one section of the road will help alleviate the parking issues in that area. Could you perhaps elaborate on that, please?
Sure, through to Councillor Novak. So right now, a lot of the boulevards, which is town-owned space, is well manicured, and rightfully so. Residents are frustrated that they have to continue to maintain their boulevards because they get rutted up from cars parking on them. So adding a gravel shoulder, which we did earlier this year for one resident along there, and there are other residents who have done it themselves. So adding a gravel shoulder would prevent that ongoing maintenance challenge for residents in that area, because it would just be then an extension of the road, and it would be gravel, which is more, it can accommodate vehicle use rather than like a well manicured grassy area, which can be damaged by vehicles.
So do we know how many additional parking spaces we would gain on Allbay or in that area after this work is completed?
To be clear, people are already parking there. The frustration from residents is that their front yards, which is town-owned boulevard space, is getting damaged by these vehicles that are parking on their front yards. But it is actually owned by the town. So we do have the authority to go and add gravel in those areas to prevent the damage, the ongoing damage from vehicles parked in those spaces. So it's not like we're adding parking, we're just making it more usable parking and preventing the ongoing maintenance that the residents are currently encountering.
And so are we satisfied that if this work is done, that our parking concerns on Allbay will be addressed?
So it will provide, it's not like it's providing more road space or anything. It's providing space that will not be damaged by vehicles for vehicles to park on. So they're, you know, putting no parking on one side will cause employees to park further down Allbay on the other side of the road if we did put no parking on one side. So it's not like there won't be parking on Allbay. It will just be parking in a way that won't damage people's front lawns.
And we won't run short of parking for all those people that need to park there.
Again, it's hard to say if there's a residential construction project happening, there may be an influx of trades in the area at any particular time, which we can't foresee necessarily, and we can't say, you know, this parking is only for Phillbroks employees. It would really be, or maybe there will be residents built with many suites in that area, and then all the tenants will need parking on the street, right? So it's really hard for us to say, yes, this will definitely solve our parking issue. It will provide more parking that would not damage people's front lawns.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Novick. I'll turn to Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor, and through to staff. Having been there on 2 consecutive Fridays at the same time and a Saturday, I can see that definitely that's employee parking, because there was basically no cars in that area on the Saturday, this past Saturday. And I took a few pictures the first time just to see where people, to remind myself where the vehicles were parking. And so my feeling on the intent of what staff, not just necessarily damaging Boulevard, but is the major intent for me would be that you're thinking about safety here. From when I read your report and where I'm seeing vehicles parked that are forcing people to go out into traffic. And some of the corners in that area are quite sketchy, for lack of a better word, in being able to visibility for pedestrians and vehicle traffic. So the intent is to get the vehicles far enough off the road if they're going to park there, so that there's more clear visual lanes. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And it provides also an opportunity for pedestrians, to the previous question, an opportunity to some of them to walk so that they're not on the road. Great, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I have a couple of questions. The first is Harbour Road wide enough to have parking on one side? On one side.
So, yeah, and I do want to clarify, there was a mention of maybe putting the vehicles on the south side of Harbour Road. We would have to look at that, but Harbour Road is one of our more narrow road allowances within Sidney. The town does not own very much space there, and I don't think it would accommodate the trucks that currently use Isle Marina that need to access Harbour Road from that way. I think if we put parking on the south side of Harbour Road, the gas trucks and fuel trucks that need to come in and out of Van Isle would not be able to fit, but we would have to look at that.
Sorry, I have been walking down that street for 25 years. And yes, there is a parking. Is there parking? Can parking be accommodated on both sides of the road?
No, there's parking on the north side of the road currently, and it is not wide enough to have parking on both sides.
Thank you. My second question is, for neighborhoods that have curbs and gutters throughout Sidney, there is a requirement to park a certain distance. If you're parking along the curb, to park a certain distance from the edge of the driveway or from the curb area. On Allbay Road without curbs, is the only way to enforce a proper distance for parking away from driveways to allow safe access egress for residents in and out of their driveways is to question bylaw enforcement?
Correct. If anywhere in Sidney, if someone's parked too close to a driveway, they can call town bylaw, and bylaw will come out and review it as long as time permits, and they can issue a fine to the vehicle if they are parked within the 2 meters that is permitted.
Okay, and I will add that we do not paint yellow in the residential areas on the curbs of driveways. It does happen in commercial areas, but doesn't happen in residential areas. So thank you for that clarification. Council, if there's no further questions, we do have staff recommendations. I would look for a member to move the staff recommendations for discussion. Councillor T.
If I may, Mayor, I'd like to move them one at a time.
Certainly.
Thank you. I'll move the recommendation that staff bring forward a budget item to widen the gravel shoulders on both sides of Allbay Road between Resthaven Drive and Joston Place to be considered as part of the 2025 budget deliberations.
Do we have a seconder?
Second?
We haven't moved in seconder. I'll turn to the mover and seconder.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I see instinctively the position of property owners who maintain their boulevard and their concerns, and hence the inclination for them to put out items to prevent parking in the boulevard, such as large rocks, etc. I get that. I see that, and I see this step as a means to address concerns for the property that they're maintaining, perhaps on behalf of the town, given it's the town's boulevard, you know, to help keep it look uniform and presentable, and the pride that they take in their property, that this is perhaps a means to help property owners with that end. I also think is of critical importance, you know, the second component of this motion, which I won't speak to specifically, but to say that to enable shoulder space for pedestrians would be very important, and having this gravel shoulders on both sides would be very important. And I also see this as a part of the solution and a dialogue that needs to continue to occur, not a sole source solution by any means. So I'll pause there.
Thank you. I'll turn to the seconder.
Yeah, thank you. I concur with everything Councillor Rintoul has said. Even as staff has been, I think, at pains to be clear about that this is a parking problem that we don't actually have a mechanism to solve within the parking bylaws that pertain to this part of the town. This is really a social issue and not an engineering issue at this point, because you know, as we've had a resident come forward and stipulate that there's lots of parking in that area if the staff are willing to walk a couple more blocks and actually park around the side, and we're willing to listen to the residents when they said, hey, can you park somewhere else? And it sounds like that social problem is being looked at between the residents and the business owner that lives there, as it should be. I think that's part of good neighborliness, is to have the people affected and the people who actually have control over that situation to do something about it. And while the town staff can't say anything to the employees, I'm sure that the owner of the business can, and in language that town staff are not allowed to use. They're salty guys, they work on boats. But even if it wasn't just about parking, this is something that I think we have been hearing from the residents of this area for a long time about the pedestrian issues anyway. And so in addition to making this parts of easements that, you know, these people are being asked to maintain on behalf of the town, easier for them to maintain, it's also something that is a bit of a more pedestrian infrastructure that we can add, that is addressing the country lane feel that has always been in the conflict with adding sidewalks. And so this is something that I think has finally come up with a compromise solution that hopefully will go a little bit further to addressing some of the concerns we've heard about pedestrians in this area for a long time anyway. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm supportive of the motion for a number of reasons. The issue of safety is being addressed, and I think this is a reasonable balance in terms of the needs of residents and their concern for safety, and also the need for parking for the workers in the area. In regards to some of the comments made in letters and public participation about using Resthaven for additional parking. One of the things that I hear most in the last year is how congested Resthaven is already getting for parking. So we've had issues with people who use Resthaven as a park and ride to go to the ferries. With the increased development, residential development along Resthaven, there's more cars, residents' cars parked there. Resthaven is also a popular cycling corridor. So making a provision for additional parking, I don't think is a good, Resthaven is a a good place for that. I think that's problematic. In regards to, comments about the rights of taxpayers, I mean, one thing in my mind I think we need to be reminded of is that many of the people who work along Harbour Road are taxpayers of Sidney, and that street parking is open to the public. Also, that the businesses along Harbour Road pay taxes at a far greater rate than residential taxpayers. So them having access to street parking, to me, is not unreasonable. So I think the proposal from staff covers off the needs of both, and so I'm happy to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm in favor of this motion. I appreciate the correspondence that's come forward on the agenda and the speakers who presented this evening. Wife and I rented a home on Resthaven that its backyard was into what was previously an open area onto Allbay, and for the past 24 years we're living a stone's throw and frequent Allbay Road and Harbour Road as a circular route regularly, and we know that the shoulders, while some of the shoulders are shoulders of the road, the town public right-of-way, are landscaped by the residents. We appreciate the pride the residents have in how they care for that town property. However, safety has been a concern for many, many years. Pedestrian safety has been a concern for many, many years on that stretch of road, partly in the change in elevation, the curve, and I think it was a reasonable, a good decision by council of the day some years ago to keep the paved roadway narrow rather than widening it as a traffic calming measure. I know there's residents, we've certainly seen it walking the area, that there is some speeding there. But even without the speeding, two-way traffic on that road with pedestrians can pose a safety concern for those walking. I remember when our daughter was 8 years old or 10 years old, and you're walking, without curbs and sidewalks on that area. It's an access to Roberts Bay. It's a nice neighborhood. So it is town right-of-way. We appreciate what the residents desire in terms of reducing traffic, reducing parking, maximizing their landscaping for the residents. But Harbour Road Marine Industrial has been a marine industrial area for decades, for over 60 or 70 years. There's over 20 businesses operating in that marine industrial area. We acknowledge that as one of the economic engines of our community, as a marine industrial park, and there are parking challenges. In terms of the request to table this to consider other parking options, Resthaven is open now. We can't create more parking opportunities on Resthaven. There is available parking when there is or there isn't on Resthaven today. So I don't see the need to study or to look at an option of Resthaven being additional parking. We can't change the parking on Harbour Road. We can have parking on one side and not the other. So I think the combination of factors of it being a marine industrial area, of it being the town right-of-way, of pedestrian safety being a concern, I think this is a reasonable way forward to balance the concerns of safety and parking in the area. I'll leave my comments there, and we may have more discussion on the next two recommendations. So we have moved. We do have the first recommendation on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul if you'd like to proceed with the next recommendation.
Thank you. I'll move the recommendation that if wider gravel shoulders are approved as part of 2025 budget deliberations, one side of this section of Allbay Road be marked as no parking to accommodate pedestrian traffic.
Second.
We have it moved in second. I'll again turn to the mover and seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, no, I think I see this as not a concession to residents, but as just some fair balance for both the immediate adjacent residents, but equally as important to provide that safety corridor on the opposite side of the street for pedestrians, which we understand has been missing in the current scenario. So I support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Turn to the seconder.
No, nothing to add further to my previous comment.
Thank you. Councillor Gurnett?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and having been out there and what I didn't add is the first time I went out and parked out there, I actually walked it. And I have familiarity with the area as being a letter carrier for years and delivering mail in the area. So I am familiar with the particular, as you get past east of Bowden, the dangers and the curves in the road. And I think that, and we've heard quite often over the years about safety concerns. So I think this is an important piece of it. Like Councillor Rintu spoke to the balance, but to provide an area where people can actually walk and feel safe and not have to worry about stepping in and around vehicles and not knowing what's coming, I think is an important piece of this. So I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I only want to briefly add that I meant to add on when I first spoke is that, you know, walking in evenings and weekends, there is resident or visitors to the resident parking on Allbay Road. So, I mean, I think it does strike a balance overall. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Councillor Rintu?
Thank you. If the mayor is all right with this, I'll move this for discussion.
Sorry, the third, there's a third recommendation?
That's right. I'm not enamored with it, but I'll move it for discussion.
You'll move it for discussion? Do you just want, can you read it out? Too?
I can.
Thank you.
I'll move the recommendation that staff proceed with bylaw enforcement on the items that are currently placed in the boulevard on Allbay Road.
Second.
We haven't moved in second for discussion. Councillor?
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me, please. I'd like to hear my colleagues' thoughts on this. I mean, I understand that the town already has the authority to move forward as is directed in recommendation number 3. Excuse me. But given the timing that we have discussed above in the recommendations, that this is budget process 2025 in terms of moving forward with any direct improvements to the roadways in the area, I'm a little hesitant to see us aggressively move forward with bylaw enforcement with respect to items that are currently placed on the boulevard. So I'll yield there. I appreciate where staff is moving forward with this, and they've already written a letter to residents, and I think the tone is set with respect to that we're moving in that direction. I just don't know that we need to up the ante, so to speak, at this time, so I'll pause. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan?
I'm of generally the same feeling. I'm not even sure that this is required because we already have the mechanism to do this, and staff has already begun proceeding with the bylaw enforcement process that we have, which is, of course, notification with letters and, verbal contact and things like that, long before it gets to actually issuing fines. And so it seems like they're already kind of in this enforcement process as it is, and I'm not sure that we actually needed a motion from council to direct staff to do this. But I'm also not sure that if we didn't move it, it would halt that process because it's already the bylaw process we have. And so I'm kind of, on the one hand, I don't think we need to move it. On the other, I don't think it matters if we move it, that it's expediting anything that isn't already in place.
Just before going to other council members, Councillor Novick and Councillor Garnett, I'll put a question through to staff based on previous remarks, and that is, why are staff making this recommendation when we have bylaw provisions in place and enforcement has been occurring?
So this issue came up because of the letter that was sent to residents, and we just wanted confirmation that our approach is what council would like us to do. Like if council would prefer that we allow residents to leave items on the boulevard, that's important to hear now, but if council is okay with us proceeding based on the letter that a resident did attach, then we will proceed with that. But you're probably right, a resolution isn't necessarily needed. However, we would like to confirm that we're going in the right direction with this.
It would be a small amendment, and I'm not making an amendment, but that staff proceed kind of indicates that it may not have been happening in the past. When it is, staff would be continuing. But again, I believe staff will act reasonably in bylaw enforcement without this motion, and staff have indicated. So I'll leave it to council whether we proceed with this or we withdraw it. And I'll turn to the speakers, Councillor Novick and Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not in favor of this. As has already been noted, we already have the ability to enforce bylaw, and typically my understanding is that bylaw enforcement is usually done on a complaints basis. So if somebody complains about something, called bylaw officer, and the bylaw gets enforced. Given the fact that we've moved ahead on the first two recommendations, and even though it may take a year, more or less, for this project to be realized, I think that this recommendation number 3 would simply irritate the residents of Allbay without providing us with any useful mechanism that we don't already have. So I'll vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to say that to me, this is operational in nature, and I trust our staff to do what's right, and they'll follow the protocols they always do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I agree that perhaps this wasn't needed if staff already have the authority to move forward. However, I understand they're wanting some assurance that we're comfortable with them moving forward. So I'm okay with supporting the motion as it is. They've given some rationale in terms of liability and other things. So if this is what staff needs to feel comfortable and moving forward with what they've started already, I'm happy to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you. Just in reflecting on some of my colleagues' comments, I guess my concern with a more proactive or elevated approach just relates to the timing of when the staff, when this project would move forward. And I've heard suggestion from a colleague that it could take up to a year. I'm just not sure that this, again, is a motion that's necessary. I concur with the mayor's comments that I'm sure staff would move forward with this in an appropriate manner. I think it's maybe another minor concession if we were to pause those efforts with the perhaps the opportunity for education and engagement of the bylaw officer further to the letters and to advise of any decisions that we anticipate may well come forward at budget time to changes with parking in that area. I'm inclined to withdraw the motion, Mayor.
So I have, the mover is seeking to withdraw the motion. I'll turn to the seconder if they concur.
Yeah, to me this seems that staff was seeking, as Councillor O'Keefe noted, kind of direction on enforcing the bylaws that we currently have as they've explained in their letter, or somewhat pausing in the enforcement they're allowed to do, and seeking kind of guidance on how council felt about that. And it looks like most of my colleagues feel that pausing the regular rate of enforcement might be more amenable to finding a solution for the neighborhood. And as Councillor Rintoul has said, maybe discussing with the bylaw officer about how to continue, maybe working individually with the residents. might be a more appropriate process at this point. I don't know if Councillor Rintoul was planning an alternate motion. I can see
Okay,
him writing something.
if I can interject for a moment on process, not on deliberating, is if this motion is withdrawn and there is no subsequent motion, staff will continue to enforce the bylaw. If we pass this motion, they'll continue to enforce the bylaw, and we're just recommitting, if you will, council after a discussion that we're supportive of council, we're supportive of staff continuing to enforce. However, if the option is to withdraw this motion and then a subsequent motion arising is to request staff by motion to relax parking enforcement, I think I would want to hear first from staff the implication from that. I'm not sure that there's precedent for that. My memory is sometimes shorter than I would like, but so there are three options here. We can pass this motion. We know what the effect will be. Staff will continue to enforce. We can withdraw the motion, not put anything forward. Staff will continue to enforce. But if we withdraw it, and there's a third option of doing that. So we have the mover seeking to withdraw. Your decision, Councillor?
I'll consent.
So the motion is withdrawn. I will look to council if anyone would like to make a motion, an alternate motion. Councillor Rintoul.
I have a motion arising. It's not an alternate to that.
Sorry, pardon my language. Go ahead.
As a motion arising, I move that staff bring forward a budget item to study parking along Harbour Road and along Resthaven near Harbour Road, and engage with employers as a part of that process on parking, employee parking, excuse me.
I'll second that.
So we have it moved and seconded. I'll turn to the mover and seconder.
I think what I'd like first is to clarify with staff that that there are no other engagements planned that might prove this direction unnecessary, be it either parking related studies or engagements with employers in the area. But I think we heard from residents both at the presentation and in writing that there's more exploration that could well happen in this area. This problem isn't new. The budget direction that we've provided this evening will only lead to further discussion during the budget process on these projects. I don't believe that by any means this is a silver bullet solution, and that there will be more to be done. We support the employers and the employees along Harbour Road, and we value our residents, and we need to continue to look to strike a balance. Again, this problem's not new. It's not going away with the direction that we're moving this evening. So I think we need to further engage the community residents and have the data from a refreshed parking study in that area to help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Novick to seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with my colleague. I think a little more study is warranted. I agree that Harbour Road could possibly work better if parking is on the south rather than the north. I understand that only one side parking makes sense. As far as trucks turning the corner, the parking could have a 20-meter distance from Bowden. There are, I believe, other solutions possible, and I think this would be a way to explore them. And at least then, if staff comes back to council with a report looking at all possible options in the area, then we'll know and we'll be confident that we've explored everything that is possible. And I think the residents of the Allbay area would feel that we've done our best to alleviate what is, as has been described, a long-standing and ongoing concern about parking in the area. That being said, I'm still supportive of cleaning up the shoulders with more gravel. and creating a no parking on one side of Allbay, because I think that will address some of the concerns of the residents in that area. I don't think we can ever fully address all those concerns. As my colleague stated, and as our mayor stated, the businesses in this area are vital to the economy of Sidney, and their staff, many of whom may be Sidney residents, have just as much a right to park on the road as anybody else. What we need to do is perhaps manage the situation a little bit better, and I believe this motion would be a step in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Directors Garnett and O'Keefe next.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff.
Councillors.
Sorry, I just want to check on staff capacity for this kind of work, and if you feel that's something you can work into your schedule, or if that would make things a little more challenging for you.
Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett, and through the mayor to Councillor. I would let Jen also speak to this as well, but my sense is that staff are at full capacity right now, and that this project in and of itself was not on the work plan for this year or next. And so with the proposal that's before you tonight, there was going to need to be some rejigging of some priorities to be able to accommodate this, and to expand it further into a more in-depth planning and assessment project will further challenge staff capacity. But I'll turn to Jen to see if she has anything to add.
Ms. Clary.
Yeah, I guess further to that, it'd be nice to know what sort of timing you're looking at, because that does impact things. If you were hoping to have that done in 2025, it would be very challenging. But if you wanted to work it into a later year work plan, that might be something that's more feasible.
So thank you, Ms. Clary. I will turn to Ms. Nelson. I believe the motion put on the floor was for something to be brought forward to budget.
Yes, that is correct.
2025 budget. So in terms of priority timeline, but we would have a better understanding perhaps of capacity relative to the budget then. But thank you, staff, both staff, for the comment. Councillor Garnett,
Given staff's comments, given the way the motion is worded, I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Yeah, I will not be supporting the motion for a couple of reasons. In terms of parking on Resthaven, parking is already available on Resthaven, so I'm not sure what else we would get from doing an investigation on parking on Resthaven. It's already there. It's available to be used. It's already a corridor that is being challenged, as I said before. In regards to Harbour Road, staff just told us that there's no further capacity to add parking on Harbour Road. So I don't know why we would ask them to revisit that. If that's their current assessment, I concur with that. Staff have also said that although we could talk to employers in the area to look at other options, they're really not required to provide any additional parking. You know, it would have been, you know, years ago, if we knew that the industry was going to expand the way it was, we could have provided more space for that area, but we didn't. So I don't see that anything productive would come out from that. In addition to, we've got a lot of other things on our plate already. Staff we've given them a full plate, a lot of other projects, and so in the scheme of things, I can't, it doesn't make sense to put more time and energy into something that is, in my view, likely to not provide any good additional options. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make one comment about the Harbour Road option. While it's true that there are fewer driveways or access points along the south side of Harbour Road, which would enable more cars to be parked along that side, it's more dangerous parking than it is on the north side, because the road right-of-way and property line is right at the curb on the south side of the road. And it'd be very tight parking for any passengers or for any other equipment or materials that people were trying to get in and out of vehicles. Whereas the parking on the north side, the passenger side parking is on the sidewalk, which is always the safest option. So while you may be able to squeeze a dozen or more cars in on the south side, it's the less favorable option from an experience and safety perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. My comments are, I won't be supportive of the motion. I don't think a study on Resthaven, I'm not sure what that will produce, given that there's already parking available there. And having now heard that staff have already given consideration to parking on the south side versus the north side, I'm not sure what further information could come forward to inform council. So I'll leave my comments there. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Gurnett, myself are opposed. The motion is defeated. Are there any other motions arising on this item? Seeing none, we will have completed that item 13A, and we'll now turn to item 13B. Item 13B is the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant on the Bowerbank Bikeway. We have a report from the Director of Engineering. I'll turn to Ms. Clary for a second time, please.
Thank you. Staff are proposing to apply for the BC Active Transportation Grant to construct the Bowerbank Bicycle Boulevard, which we are now referring to as the Bowerbank Bikeway, because it also includes the Calvin Lane paving. All of those projects were approved as part of the 2024 budget process. The town is eligible for funding of 70% of the project and up to $500,000. So we plan to apply for the entire $500,000. We do require a council resolution, so that is why it's coming forward to council tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. Are there any questions for staff on this report? If not, I'd look to a member to move the recommendations. Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move the staff recommendation that staff be authorized to pursue funding from the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Program for the Bowerbank Bikeway, and that the following conditions apply. 1, the local share of funding is available and supported. 2, the project is a municipal priority. 3, the project is intended to be completed by March 31st, 2026. And 4, the project is at the stage where construction can begin immediately once provincial funding has been announced and local weather conditions allow, i.e. is shovel ready.
I'll second.
We haven't moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Just to say thank you to staff for finding this option. That saves the community a considerable amount of money that we can put towards other active transportation issues and crosswalks, sidewalks, and what have you in the future. So if we're successful, this would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor.
Likewise, thanks to staff for finding this option. I think it's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? That motion carries unanimous. Thank you to staff. Thank you, Council. We're turning to item 13C, which is the Sidney Street Market Agreement. And I'll turn to Ms. Clary again for an introduction, please.
Thank you. KMAX Services was the successful proponent for the 2024 Sidney Street Market operations. KMAC did an excellent job this past summer managing the market, and staff are therefore recommending a longer contract renewal. We're proposing a 2-year contract with the option of extending for 2 additional times for 2 years each time, so a total of 6 years. The agreement stays largely the same with a few housekeeping items, and we, although not attached, we are updating the map as well of Beacon Avenue to reflect the actual curb alignments. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from council? I have one, and that is one of the letter writers made a request that the valet bicycle parking be included in the agreement. Can staff describe how that agreement is separate? And there's also a request for perhaps additional communication at the various entry points to the market, highlighting if staff could comment if there might be opportunities there as well.
Sure. for the public's knowledge, the bike parking, the bike valet was something that was sponsored by the town last year and this year. So the current market operator has not worked that into their budgets for future years. If we did want to include that as a requirement of them, we would want to give them more notice than this, because it's not a free service. We do pay Capital Bike to set that up for us. However, we will bring that forward for council consideration in future budgets, again, because it was a successful program, and we can work with Capital Bike to improve signage through the market to make sure people know where it is. So thank you for that feedback.
Excellent, thank you. And so I would look to a colleague to make the recommendation. Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation, and I so move that the agreement with KMAX Services to operate the Sidney Street Market for the 2025 and 2026 seasons be approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank staff for Schedule C number 2, where the market provides no less than 5 spaces for community groups. And I know from being liaison to the museum that they used it for 13 weeks and were able to engage a large amount of people in the community, which is a really important part of their outreach. And so I just thankful for staff for including that in our community groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor O'Keefe? I'm sorry. I'll withhold announcing the decision.
Yeah, no, it was okay. I just also wanted to compliment staff. I think they've tweaked the agreement over what we've had in the past. I also like the inclusion of a minimum of 5 community groups, and also that any potential sponsorships must be approved by the town. So, yeah, thank you to staff for a good job on that. That's all. Thank you.
And I'll take that as a vote in the affirmative. That motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We're now turning to 13D, which is the monthly building report for September. We're receiving this for information on the agenda. Is there any questions or comment from colleagues? We don't require a motion. Seeing none, I'm turning to correspondence, and now I see why Ms. Nelson was nodding at me while I was during agenda review, indicating that the 2 items being raised for correspondence information should not be 14A and B, they should be 14B and C. So we'll deal with the item 14A as on the agenda and then go to those 2 items that were raised after that. 14A is the Roberts Bay Environmentally Sensitive Area. We've had correspondence from Mr. N. Scott with a recommendation. I'll turn to Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you. I'll move referral to strategic planning.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? We've corresponded with Mr. Scott, and he's appreciative of this. I'll call the question. All in favor? That motion carries. Turning to the new item 14B, Councillor O'Keefe, I'll turn to you to speak to the letter of correspondence from Mr. Cavalier, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to bring this up just because normally we do provide a response to residents. And maybe I'll start first with a question through you to staff in regards to this. And I'm wondering whether we have had a chance yet to consider when our strategic planning will take place and what format is envisioned for that.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for your question. With discussions with staff and with the Mayor, we're proposing that the strategic planning session take place in January. Given that the last strategic planning occurred in February, we felt that that additional time was not a hindrance to the strategic planning process, and it's still within the 2025 budget process. So there's still an opportunity for that strategic planning to inform the 2025 budget. And in terms of structure of the meeting, that would be a closed meeting. And as with most or all strategic planning processes with municipal and local government bodies, it initiates as a closed meeting, but the second part of it is in a public open forum where the draft report or the draft plan would be coming back in an open meeting for finalization of consideration of council and approval and adoption in that open meeting. And so that would be the format and and the timing.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess we'll have further discussions on this closer to January. I still have questions, and maybe at some point we can get confirmation or legal advice on this. My further interest on this was tweaked when I went to AVICC earlier this year, and they had a presentation from a law firm, Young Anderson, who provides legal advice to local governments. And the topic was on the open meetings and what should be open and what should be closed. And so when we talked about strategic planning, their view was that these should be held in open sessions, that anything where there's significant discussions taking place or debate about things should be done in an open session. And they cited several case studies where municipalities had not done things in open session, and then those decisions could be challenged afterwards. So I know that, when I first started on council in 2018, we did have some sessions that were open sessions. I don't recall that we had any issue with that. So I'd be leaning more towards an open session. Perhaps prior to January, we can get some further information about that from staff. So I'm not making a motion at this time, but maybe just a request that we might have further information from staff closer to January. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor. Through Mayor to Councillor. I'm very curious about that session with Young Anderson. I know the folks or some of the folks at Young Anderson, and I would love to have a discussion with them about that. The majority, if not all, local governments do hold their strategic planning sessions enclosed before releasing drafts to open. The Community Charter Section 90.1-L provides the provision for it to be enclosed, so I'm surprised that it could be challenged in the courts. So, but I welcome that kind of a discussion and open to hearing it.
Yeah, and so if there's an opportunity to clarify that with them one way or the other, that would be useful. Thank you.
Oh, and just corporate officer reminded me too that during the strategic planning closed sessions, decisions are not actually made. It's during the open sessions where the decisions are ratified and finalized.
Yes, and I understand that, and that was one of the things that was discussed, is that it's not just bringing the decision forward in an open session, but letting the public see the debate and the discussion that took place. So that was my take on it. But again, it might be useful to have some clarification from the legal folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And so we've addressed that item, and I will turn to the third item, back to Councillor O'Keefe regarding the letter from C. Ozawa.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, maybe a couple of questions to staff on this first. In terms of, I was wondering, what measures do we put in place to hold contractors liable for damage to trees on private property or even public property during construction?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, we do require tree protection fencing to be put around trees within a construction site, and then an arborist is supposed to be on site if any work is being done within that construction fencing area. The town's arborist was on site for this particular project. This was a town-owned project. We were replacing a storm and sewer main that went through a backyard easements in this area. It was a pipe bursting project, but I do understand that this area, they did do some open cut trenching as well. So the town's arborist was around during the construction, not there full-time, obviously. Yeah, from his opinion, it's challenging to tell what caused the death of this particular tree.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. I get the, understand the, Ms. Ozawa's, concern in regards to, the tree, was looked at by our arborist and seemed healthy. She had expressed concerns about how the root systems were being exposed during the construction. And then a year later, the tree is dead. And she has to bear the cost of that. And I understand that it's difficult, of course, to say, what was the cause for this? Would the tree have died anyways? However, it seems that perhaps that construction might have played a role. And I'm just wondering, what options do we have for assisting the homeowner in having the tree removed, knowing that it's likely to be costly?
I'll turn to staff. Ms. Clary.
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, although property owners are typically required to maintain or remove trees within their private property, if directed by council, the town could pay for a third-party arborist to remove the tree, or the town staff could do it as long as the property owner was willing to sign a liability waiver for doing work on private property. The town staff don't typically do work on private property, but we could, if directed by council, to do so. And we do in some instances where there's emergency work, where we have to remove a tree to access one of our utilities if we do have an easement going through that area. This particular backyard, we don't have an easement on or anything. We have no rights to really be there to remove the tree. So we would need the property owner's permission.
Okay, thank you for that. And I presume that if we had our own arborist do it, that would be significantly less costly.
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, the town's arborist is very efficient, and the town does not profit off of these types of things, so I would think so. However, I don't know the cost of a private company to do this.
Great, okay. Based on that, I'll make a motion for council's consideration that the town take responsibility for the removal of the dead tree on Miss Ozawa's property.
Might I suggest an amendment with the property owner's consent?
Yes, okay, with the property owner's consent.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second. Sorry, I'll second. Sorry, if I can ask, should we state the address in the motion? Is that necessary? Okay.
I was going to, but it wasn't included in the letter.
Never mind. Thank you.
So.
Yeah, no, I think we've clarified that. Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Gurnett. So we haven't moved and seconded. Further motivation, Councillor O'Keefe?
I guess I'd just say that I understand that it's difficult to know for sure what was the intent or what was the issue that caused the tree's demise. But it seems to me, based on the current events, that there's a good chance that it was due to that construction that took place. I know that we don't want to get into the habit of doing this on a regular basis to take down trees on property, but to me, I think there's extenuating circumstances, and if we can do it with in-house arborists, it sounds like it could be done with little cost and very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to the seconder, Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. And just a question, if I may, to staff. Given that we're sort of working shorthanded in the arborist department right now, and our arborist is extremely busy most of the time, with this, I'm just wondering in terms of timing, because he normally has a pretty large stack of paperwork he has to go through, so how this will impact his ability to get to this particular tree.
Through to Councillor Garnett, he is going through town removing trees now, as I know you should be aware from emails, because to remove them before the snow, or before the storm season. So I expect he would be able to get to it before then. As you mentioned, he is extremely busy, but tree removals is more of a priority when they are dead like this.
Great. Thank you, Chair. I have nothing more to add. Councillor Keefe has added everything. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff, if I may. Is the specificity in this motion sufficient to address perhaps the property owner's expectations around stump removal, root chasing? I don't know what town staff normally do, since we're asking the town arborist to take on this project. I just would like staff and the property owner to be clear what this motion entails. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
I'll turn to Ms. Clary if you have additional comment.
Through to Councillor Rintoul, you are right, like root grinding or stump grinding and removing roots does add a lot of costs, so that wasn't what I was envisioning as far as tree removal goes. Just to clarify, we would, the town's arborist would go remove the tree, and then the stump, remaining stump and roots would be the property owner's responsibility.
Thank you. And I think that's a fair clarification. I just wanted to ensure that all parties, it's clear to all parties now before this vote proceeds that that's the approach the town would take. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul, Councillor Novick for a first time, and then go to Councillor O'Keefe a second time.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, through you to staff, just to clarify, this particular tree is not on an easement. Is that correct?
Correct.
And could you just tell us briefly what the town's responsibilities are to a tree that is on an easement?
Through to Councillor Novak, that was referenced I was making that reference because if there was a utility underneath an easement, the town would have the authority to go on top of that easement and remove the tree. Where this location is fully private property with no easement, that gives the town authority to access it without the property owner's permission.
Okay.
So we're not responsible for maintaining trees on,
You want to turn your mic off, Councillor?
we're not responsible for maintaining trees on easements, but if we did have to access a tree on easement, we have the authority to do so.
Okay, thank you. I have some concerns about this. I think it sets a bit of a precedent. The evidence suggesting that the contractor damaged the tree sufficiently for it to die is not obvious. It's not clear. I would hate for us to be put in a situation where every time there's work done and a tree dies that the owner comes to town and asks us to remove it. So I'm not sure whether I'm supportive of this motion or not at this point, but I'm just concerned that it sets a bit of a dangerous precedent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further, Councillor Duncan?
Thank you. I have concerns about the precedent as well, and I keep looking at this, trying to think of ways that in future, why this property would be a different issue than future issues that might come forward of similar nature, where work was done adjacent to a property and a tree died on the property nearby, and that would limit this, and that this was kind of a one-time thing with special circumstances that required us to do something outside the norm. And I can't see what it is. I know that we've had other developments go forward where the contractors were expected to protect the root systems of trees, and then far more trees died and on town property, and we were on the hook to replace those as they were not. So this keeps coming up. I'm also worried because I know that this is during a period of time when there is that massive heat dome, and a lot of trees died all over town. I took down 3 on my property, vines and trees as a result. So and just this year, so several years after the event happened. So being able to say it was because of one, definitely this, when other trees are dying for a very common reason in the same time frame, I really have trouble moving to put this under the town's liability in a way that is limited to this example, because it doesn't actually seem that unusual. It's also, and I don't know if the property owner has gotten a quote, but I know when my neighbor's tree fell on my house, it how much they had to spend to get that tree taken down. And again, this is not an undue it's not a huge hardship. This is not the kind of thing where you're looking at like, wow, this person is not going to be able to pay their bills anymore. I'm sorry, I'm just really struggling with being able to put this under the town's liability and purview.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe, you were next.
Thank you. I was just going to thank Councillor Rintoul for his comments about the stump in the root. I would agree that those would be things that the homeowner would cover themselves. I think I see this as kind of a compromise that it's, as other councillors have mentioned, it's hard to say exactly why the tree died. I think the best we can say is that it's the course of events leads one to think that there's a correlation between the construction and the demise of the tree. So to me, it's a bit of a compromise that will take down the tree. Our arborists can do it at a lesser cost, and then it's up to the homeowner to take take care of the rest of the things in terms of the stump. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll support the motion on the floor. There is a degree of uncertainty as to the demise of the tree in connection with the work of the town. And I think I don't think this is a dangerous precedent. I don't know how many instances occur where the town is doing work in its easement area, and this kind of situation arises. This is not speaking to tree removal in general. It's speaking to the unique circumstances of this particular incident. I'll leave my comments there. Looking around the room, seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Novick is opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We're next turning to our items, remaining items of correspondence for information. There are 3. They are being received on our agenda. There's no motion required. That concludes our business on this evening's agenda. Council, I look for mover and seconder to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Novick, seconded by Councillor Gurnett. All in favor? We are